Hello and welcome to the Happiness Jungle TV show. I'm your guest host, CamiBaker.com. And as always, I am excited about our guests. I love our studio. I love the guys here that help us create these shows. And I love the people that I get to interview. This has just been a wonderful experience for me being the host of this show. And today I have a guest that I met at a conference in California about 3 months ago. Eamon Rooney, and we met at a Michael Griffith event and just hit it off. And I thought, wow, he's got a lot of fun wisdom to share with our viewers. So, Eamon, go ahead and tell our viewers a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you, Cami. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Eamon Rooney. I'm originally from Ireland, and I moved over here to the US about 20 years ago. And when I moved to the US, I came for a job. I was in charge of the Americas, the North and South America market for a large Swiss electronics company. As soon as I arrived, things started to go downhill real quick, and it was a bit of a shock to be thrust into this particular role, a CEO role, and then things went to hell in a handbasket in a few months, mainly because of the dot-com bust. And it took a number of years to figure it out and turn it around, and in the meantime, then I met my now wife and decided life on the West Coast would be better than life on the East Coast. So excuse me for that. Moved over to the West, and when I got here, I realized I needed something to do and discovered coaching. I had no idea what coaching was. So I ended up getting into business coaching, mainly because of my background.
Isn't it interesting how when we have a breakdown, sometimes it's a breakthrough for something bigger and better? Because if that CEO position had worked out, you wouldn't be coaching and helping so many thousands of people now. So talk a little bit about that. Like, what's your niche?
What I focus on is, essentially when I became CEO, I had to go to school to business administration. So that's kind of what I was trained to do, is run businesses. So obviously my focus then on coaching is about helping the business run better. And that covers a whole sorts of things. So essentially what I've focused ultimately over the last 10 years or so come to focus on is mainly how to organize the business so that it can survive for the long term, and then the team and the people inside of it, how they're going to make the business run effectively so it will survive for the long term. And that's kind of what I focus on, is building that organization that's going to last.
You know, there are so many aspects of running a business, and, you know, of all the coaches and mentors and systems and things, they all have their place. So who actually do you have a place for? Like, in other words, is there a certain size company? Is there a certain industry? What do you really like to focus on?
You know, I've struggled with industry mainly because what I do is focused on the people in the business. So the business, what they do, isn't really an issue for me. It's more there's an owner or owners that have, 10, 15 plus people, and they're trying to figure out how to grow, and they're finding the fact that they have a team is becoming difficult to manage, or they spend more of their time managing their people or maybe fighting fires than they are helping the business grow. So that's kind of the transition point that they're at.
Now, as a person who came over to be a CEO for a company, obviously you had a background in business long before. What kind of degree or background do you have?
Well, I started off as an engineer, and I graduated from engineering school in Ireland. And at the time when I graduated, there weren't a lot of jobs in Ireland. So I managed to get a job in Japan, of all places, which is a great place for an engineer back in the late 80s. Japan was the place to be. And I ended up staying there about 8 years. So I learned the language, and in the meantime, when I first arrived, I realized about a week or so after I started my first job, I didn't want to be an engineer. It's kind of like, I don't want to do this. I loved the whole idea of technology and understanding it, but I didn't want to do all the nitty-gritty stuff. And I realized I needed the language first so I could get something else. And when I learned the language, then I moved into a sales engineering role, and I found working with people to be far more fun than just the technical aspect of the business.
Wait a minute. Are you saying you learned how to speak Japanese?
I did, yes. Read, write, and speak.
Aren't you quite the accomplished person? But then again, you're an engineer, so you're clearly a bright boy. So that's a lot of classes and a lot of learning to go through to become an engineer, just to decide, I don't think I want to do that.
Yeah, it was kind of like, why did I do that? And then when I think back, there weren't a lot of options. And when I looked at all the subjects that I could choose from, a lot of them I didn't particularly like. I didn't know much about them. And physics was the only one that I kind of gravitated, physics and history. And my thought was like, well, physics, maybe engineering would be a good route. History, maybe not so much opportunities. Particularly in Ireland, as it was in the late 80s, before it became the Celtic Tiger, there weren't a lot of opportunities. So it was more out of pragmatic choice. It was getting through engineering school was tough, but it also taught me how to persevere, get through it. And then obviously when I hit Japan, it was also again an element of, I got to learn something so I can move on to a better job. Also the company I worked for, I learned so much working with them. And then the language, obviously they insisted I learn the language, which was great because they provided classes. And so they insisted we take the national language proficiency tests. So that pushed us, well, there was a group of us, there were 6 of us in this company, and they pushed us to elevate our Japanese. And I found that it was when I left that company and started with this European company that my Japanese just jumped. Because I didn't have to use it. I'd learned it, but I didn't have to use it. And now all of a sudden I was saying things I didn't realize I knew.
I'm curious, how long did it take you to become that proficient in Japanese?
I think it was probably because I was immersed in it. I recall when the first few months when I was there was me and a friend when we were in the same college, but not the same course. And we'd go out for dinner. I was good at the reading, he was good at the speaking, so I'd read the menu and he'd order it. So it took a while to get to it, but I would say conversant, a social conversation, maybe 3 months or so.
Really? Just 3 months?
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
But you're surrounded by it all day.
True.
So if you really want to learn the language, it's immersion learning, really.
There's a place here in New England called Omega Institute. And if you go to the Omega Institute, they will teach you how to speak Spanish. I think it's only a couple of weeks long, but to your point, it's totally immersion. The minute you get there, that's all you speak. That's all everything, right? For that 2 weeks or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. And you focus on things. And one of the challenges I see with business owners, they're immersed in their business, but the learning isn't as easy. It's a lot of challenges, a lot of problems. They're facing questions, decisions that maybe they haven't had to make before, or the consequences of those decisions are far more meaningful to them or their customers, and they're doing their best to make the right choice, and they're learning along the way as to what worked and what didn't work. And I guess I have a little bit of an advantage because I was taught, but I was taught to run bigger companies. And when it translates to a smaller company, it doesn't always work as easily as I would think.
I find that for people that I work with, sometimes there's ego involved. So when you say that you learned to speak Japanese in 3 months, I mean, that's such a complete turn from speaking English that you kind of had to ask for help, and you had to admit that you didn't know what you were doing, and you had to study it to learn it. But when it comes to business, people will come from a different background. They'll come in from teaching or nursing or CEO or running a different type of company, and they don't want to look like they don't know what they're doing, and so instead of asking for help, they actually remain rather ignorant because they're afraid of looking ignorant. Ignorance keeps us in everlasting ignorance,
Yes. What happened to that phrase, ignorance is bliss? It doesn't work in business for sure. I mean, certainly a lot of the people I work with recognize within themselves, if you have an honest conversation with them, they recognize within themselves what they're not good at. But also in a conversation, I'm always looking for the things that they're really excited about. So I'm looking at having that initial conversation. What do they get? When somebody's excited because they won't shut up. They keep talking and talking, and then you see their energy shift towards what they really love about what they do. And then my job is really to help them not just spend more time doing that, but organize their business around what it is that they enjoy. Because if they're doing that, guess what? Their customers are going to be so happy as well.
I would love to hear an example. Like, give me an example of like a company that, you met them, here's what was going on, and here's what you did, and here's where they're at now.
All right. So there's one, it's a very small one, and she deliberately wants to keep it small because she's very focused on her customer service. So when we started, it was just her, and she runs this daily money management business, which is helping seniors in particular, but also other people who are who don't really know how to manage their daily finances. So help them manage that. So when she started, she had this, it was a late in life business start, and she decided she wanted to do this business, so she got it started. And then we connected through a chamber, or our local chamber, and she decided she wanted to grow. And then as she started to grow, she realized now she needed to add people. And as she began to add people, we spent a lot of time making sure she found people that could deliver the same experience that she delivered. And that was the key. It wasn't just adding people, it was people who could replicate the experience, not exactly, but the feelings that the customers would feel at the end of an engagement was like, yeah, this was great. Working with such and such was fantastic. So now she's up to 4 people. And she's got a really, really comfortable business that she's enjoying. And so she's toyed with the idea of making it bigger, but then she realized, no, I'm just enjoy what I'm doing. I'm happy that I'm able to make other people happy. And her service, she's inundated with referrals simply because the level of excellence and the attention to detail, but also the experience people have in working with her and her team.
Nice.
And that's just one, yeah. It gets a little harder when you move to a larger business, because now you may have the owner. Let's say there's 300-400 people in the organization. Now it's harder to monitor the impact of customer experience. It's harder. Yet most business owners of that size are looking at profitability as a measure. So if profits for any given particular project or engagement go up and down, you can begin to see there's something not quite right. And intuitively, owners of that size are always matching the people that they're going to have deliver something to the customer, particularly a service. Will my person match with this particular owner so that they get on together? So there's always a lot of that going on, and they're doing it intuitively. And I kind of help them understand a little bit more what style of behavior their customer is, what they are, what their people are, so they can better match them so that they get that same experience more consistently. And hence profitability tends to go up.
So do you typically work with the one owner, or do you come in and train the whole team? Because I know you mentioned to me that you also help them with staying motivated. Yes. So
sometimes it's just the owner. Frequently it is the rest of the team, depending on the size of the business. Obviously with a 300-400 person business, it's a lot bigger. But typically then it is the senior management, the owner and the senior management. There it is all about helping the team understand each other, because we have this tendency to say, okay, this makes sense to me, so why doesn't it make sense to you? Why don't you do it this way? Because that's the obvious way to do it. But we forget there are different ways of thinking and different ways of looking at the world. And when we understand the other styles of thinking and communicating, now we recognize, okay, I like to communicate this way. I like to be fast. I like to give bullet points. They like to be methodical. I got to be wary that that's the way they like to communicate. So if they're giving me information, I need to be patient. So let them get to the point. Or maybe they have too much information and I need to remind them, can you just get to the point? So there's that understanding helps teams be more effective, because it's not just whatever the boss wants, give it to him that way, and they either say too much or say nothing.
So do you actually help them figure out what their personality and communication style is? Do you have any kind of test that they take?
Yes, I favor the DISC, mainly because DISC is about communication style, but also it's about emotion. What are the emotions that tend to be dominant in any given circumstance. So what are our habits? Our habits, habitual responses. So when we're faced with something, how do we habitually respond to a situation? And that gives us an idea of what is likely to happen. So they like to respond methodically, you like to respond with action. So now we have a potential conflict. That's why they do it this way. Oh, and when people go, oh, now that makes so much sense. Now there's a little less tension in between peers or within the organization.
Yeah. You know, it's funny that it's so important to really wrap our heads around what you were just talking about. I read a book a few years ago called The Queen's Code, and she's talking in this book about the difference between how men and women communicate and how women can multitask and how men think of one thing at a time. And that's, you know, in this example, if you send him a text and he doesn't respond, it's not that he's ignoring you or trying to upset you, it's that he's doing something else because they're focused on one thing. But when you have his focus, you are the focus of his attention, you know, and it sounds so common sense, but I remember when I read that, and it was a very involved book with video and interaction and question and answer and all that, and it really helped me moving forward that when I am dating someone, that I don't take it personally if they don't, you know, because women can text and change a diaper and drive the car and write a contract all at the same time, and men just don't do that.
Because of my engineering background and recognizing that particularly with electronic circuits, that it's the time you're doing, a computer chip can only do one thing at a time, but it can switch between doing things really fast. But even when it switches, there's a recovery time. And some, you know, females are far better at switching, but there is still a recovery time. And sometimes, you know, I'm conscious of that, and I know that, okay, I'm not going to try. I'm not even going to try to be multitasking because I know I'm going to make a mistake somewhere. I'm just going to do one thing, get it done, and then move on to the next thing. And sometimes that recovery time, you know, I have to build that into my schedule because I know if I switch from something that's creatively oriented and now I got to do something that's detailed, it's going to take me time to switch my attention so I get my head around the details versus being more creative.
It's so true. Darren Hardy's one of my favorite mentors. He's the editor of Success Magazine. He's interviewed everyone from Donald Trump to Mother Teresa. And he talks about how you really cannot multitask. To your point, you're switching from one thing to another. You're not multitasking. And a great example is if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, A, B, C, D, G, F, you know, and do those separately, how fast you can go. But when you say A1, B2, C3, it's just a fabulous example of how you really are getting in that recovery period like you're talking about.
Yeah, certainly. I'm fascinated by how the mind works, but it's so complex. You know, there's so many permutations and computations and variables involved. It's like, and because I'm an engineer, it's like, well, there has to be an answer. There has to be an easier way. But then you dive into it and say, I think I found it. And then something else pops up and you go, darn, mate, that ain't going to work. So I try to look at, okay, what's simple behavior? What's driving that behavior? So I've mentioned I use DISC. And behind DISC, then I'll look at what is really motivating that particular individual. And I use another assessment called Motivators, which is based around 7 different types of motivators that we're all a blend of. And these kind of represent what we desire, what we're running away from.
Can you spit them out? Do you know what they are in order?
Yes, they are aesthetic, which is about harmony, attaining harmony. There is individualistic, which is more about standing out and being unique. There is economic, which is about usefulness. There is altruistic, which is about helping others. There is regulatory, which is about order and structure. And we have theoretical, which is about knowledge and truth. And there's one more. Political. How can I forget that one? Which is about power and influence.
Where does family fall in there?
Oh, well, these are what drives us. So, so you'll find individuals, particularly business owners, may have a strong sense of the economic, which is not just about money, it's also about getting results. So if I put effort into something, I want to see a return. Whether it's time, energy, or money, I want a return. And even if I put that energy into a person, I develop them and I train them, I want to see them progress and grow. Then I know my investment has paid off. And so that driver, now somebody who has that driver, it's not easy to predict, but it's fairly close that the organizational culture is going to be around achieving and growth in some way. So that helps me understand what their culture is going to be like. So now if I have somebody who's more aesthetic, so they're more creative, working in an environment that's more competitive or achievement oriented, they may struggle depending on the role that they're in. And if they're struggling, we'll understand why. So now we also understand that these motivators and our blend of it tells us what's the ideal environment for us to be energized all the time. And if we don't get those needs met, we go elsewhere. We may disengage from work. So if one of my strong ones is theoretical, so I like to understand things. So if I'm working with a client and I'm not learning stuff, it becomes a little bit boring. But if I can learn stuff outside, I can tolerate not learning stuff while I'm working with clients. Well, it rarely happens, but sometimes it does.
Fascinating. That's what I love about doing these interviews, is learning something new, because of all the things one of my quotes is, the more I know I don't know, and the more I know I need to know. So that's awesome.
Yes.
Now, where do you typically find your clients, or how do they find you? You mentioned that you found this lady at the chamber, and how do people typically find you? And share with our viewers how they can find you, and what's a great way to reach out to you to work with you?
Yeah, a great way to reach out is on my website or LinkedIn. If you look at my name, Eamon Rooney, I'm there on LinkedIn. You can reach me through there. The website, I think you have a link for my website as well. So on my website, they're the two main ones, and primarily, so far, my business is all referral based. Hence, that's why I was at the Michael Griffiths, learning how to do the referrals more effectively. And my intention is that ultimately, I'm going to be moving a lot of my business to an online platform. So I'll be able to do more and help more people through an online platform rather than one-to-one, which it is at the moment. Which, fun as it is, it's kind of limiting in how big I can get.
Now, can you do what you do in a group? In other words, if it's online, could multiple people from different companies join a group with you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's the next step, is being able to do a group like that. So I do them live with my clients. So now it's just doing the similar thing online, but obviously with it needs a structure and a focus, and that's what I've been developing.
Do you have a program coming up that you'd like to talk about, or any speaking engagements?
Not currently, because I'm getting ready to launch or relaunch this or launch this online part of my business in the new year. So it'll be part of, it'll be there on my website. And the idea is that people can come and learn more about understanding themselves, first of all, understanding that their business is made of individuals, not just teams, and how to take care of the individuals, and then make sure the teams are working well and that everybody's performing the right actions. And that's essentially the overview of what the program is about, because doing so, now you drive the business forward.
I could see you creating a series of videos explaining what you just explained about the 7 different types there, and different videos on how each person can interact with another. Are you in the process of doing something like that?
Yeah. One of the fun things is trying to come up with very simple models of how to explain what's going on in an easy to a graphical way, if you will. And that's fun for me. Now it's I've recently found a software application where I can draw the models and you can see me just like you can see me now, so I can do it that way. So now it's a matter of creating those videos, as you say, and that's kind of what's exciting for me, is be able to do that.
Well, we've got 2 minutes left. What's next for you?
Next is going online. It's going online, but also I did write a book 2 years ago, which has kind of led me down this path of wanting to bring more of my ideas out to the internet, or do it online and reach more people. So next, once it's online now, more referrals and obviously more speaking engagements are going to be part of spreading the message, if you will.
So what's the name of your book? Tell us a little bit about that.
Get Naked.
Nice.
Get Naked. How to create a business you love through radical transparency. So it is available on Amazon. It did hit a bestseller on Amazon, so that was quite exciting. So yes, it's just filled with different perspectives. It's idea dense. I'll put it that way.
Well, with the name like Get Naked, you had a lot of people buy it, and then they're like, what is this about?
Yes, that's a little bit of the creative engineer. What can I come up with that's intriguing yet still has some practical value?
Well, Eamon, it has been a pleasure having you on the show. I knew when I met you in California that you'd bring a lot of value to our viewers, and I want to encourage them to reach out to you. Do you have a consultation or some kind of anything like that you'd like to mention?
Certainly, just go to the website, and there's a sign-up sheet where you can sign up, and then through that, if you wish to set up, you'll get my email from there, and then through that, if you wish to have an online conversation or a chat, we can set that up and we can see where we go from there.
Awesome.
Cami, it's been a pleasure talking with you again and meeting you again.
Well, it's just another example of how Michael Griffith's group is so powerful to bring people that are like-minded together. So I want to put out the big shout out to Michael Griffith and say hello and thank you again. And Eamon, thank you for being on the show. Let's stay in touch.
That's right. Thank you, Cami.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.